second generation artist. My father was an artist. He was and still is my #1 influence. So I started my journey in art primarily because of my father. My inspiration in terms of my art, I would say first of all, God is my primary source of inspiration. My father, and in Benin culture, art is everywhere. It permeates everything. So we do art as almost a way of life. It's not separate from life. We're in an era now where art is taking a new significance, primarily in Africa. Africa always seems to be an emerging market, but has all the potential. Clearly, everyone knows that Africa has value to offer because there's so much in terms of creativity, there's so much available, and it is at a good price point for the market. So auctions are a good idea right now, and everybody's re-looking at Africa. You would agree that it hasn't been a traditional medium for a lot of our artists because primarily auctions aren't very popular in, I would say, West Africa. For artists, even from Benin or from other parts of Nigeria, they've been used to the more traditional ways of using either galleries or exhibitions. One of the things that made me also come onto this project in particular was I felt that it was long overdue. You got the fashion show, you got the food and drink event, but then there's nothing with visual arts. And you, as a bank, GT Bank, had been doing visual arts long before everybody else really kicked into it. Everybody knows GT Bank's history in the propagation of visual arts. So I said, definitely I'd want to be involved because it's important that our own industry leaders drive the agenda. And that was, in a mishmash, those are the points I would say, yes, brought me to this auction. Painting for me is, yes, it is a release. To be very honest, my method most times is I start by writing what I feel. And then I try my possible best to illustrate what I wrote. I've always been able to reach across in terms of broadening my horizon because I learned that from my dad as well. He was an avid student of philosophy, and I also have adopted quite a lot of philosophy into my work. The primary one is dualism. And of course, there are people that I read, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, and Santayana. They're all old philosophers, but they're of a specific group. I would always start from the most basic and rudimentary aspects of human life. That's where duality is, man, woman, the opposing forces. If you find a good middle ground, then it's easier to tell that story. Half the time, yes, that's where my mind is in terms of identifying what's the best middle point. How do I resonate the words in my head into line, color, texture, medium, and one of the key things for an audience is you have to draw them in. And the art world, when people try and describe what is art now, it's very tricky because in reality, it can be anything. But where it is most pure is between you and the viewer. You have to be able to share almost similar emotions. So when you make something and they see something, they should at least be on the slight same path as you. I mean, of course, people can interpret things as differently as they want. So in terms of the emotional release, catharsis, as you would say, is absolutely vital because when I know that I've done well in terms of a painting or an artwork, is if I feel spent, not physically spent, but emotionally spent after I've finished painting, then yes, I know that yes, I've done what I wanted to do. My medium of work, I would say, almost found me because, like I said, I'm a second generation artist. Whenever people talk, I'm like, I use obvious examples. You don't ask Femi Kuti why he plays Afrobeat. You don't ask him what style of music he plays. You know exactly what Femi Kuti stands for. You know, if you're a second generation artist, there's a burden that you go through. You still have to define yourself, but your DNA is programming you to do specific things. And I explore a variety of media. I do sculpture, I do my two-dimensional paintings, I do photography. I've always been able to reach across. Judging how people perceive or receive my work is always very tricky. Now, so here's the thing. Public opinions and perspectives are still largely, not for everybody, but largely rooted in that idea of, is it inspired by local culture? Is this thing fetish? You know, and then you get that point of view of like, okay, but your culture had an underlying philosophy that kept generations alive, kept civilizations alive, that 100, 200 years ago, a colonial power came and told you their way was better. We're seeing gradually unfolding every day that not everything that was brought in was good. You know, they didn't tell you everything that they were meant to tell you. So those perceptions, you now have to twist them, and we have to really tweak them over and over and over. It's not enough to say, I've met 10 people that have the right point of view, or there are more people studying cosmopolitan courses abroad and coming back. No, it's about the local perception. Pre-colonial times, art was not viewed as something that you bought. You inherited it, you owned it, and it was a vital spiritual part of a family. You know, you never moved it out of a family home. It was connected to the family, and people came and pointed, and every story in that family was tied into the artwork in that family. They'd say, this was made so and so time. It was your father or your grandfather or your great-grandfather that brought this, and that's how traditions carried on. We now have to essentially marry both. We have to, of course, highlight the commercial aspect, the aesthetic aspect, and then, of course, the spiritual and philosophical aspects for ourselves, because it's inside our narrative. My research process for work is, it actually involves some of the most traditional aspects of research, which is primarily how a philosopher would research, is observation. No matter how you find yourself, what station you find yourself in life, you know, you're wealthy, you're not wealthy, you are important or popular or you're not popular, we all have very common denominators, you know, and if you observe the human condition, you find out that there's so many things that unite everybody. If you essentially utilize those things, you will always have a relevant point of view in your work. So in 100 years, people will still look at it and say, we still do exactly that today. You're not going to, if you focus on something like the advent of maybe electronic banking. Electronic banking will be gone in another 50 years. It might be a whole different thing, you know, but how do you know? You know, so if that was the theme of your work, then it will now be a historical piece. But if you focus on something rudimentary, like birth, sex, death, joy, pain, happiness, at the end of the day, it must carry through, because that's not going to go away. It's always going to be there. I cannot absolutely describe my work, and I'm very happy that I can't, because it in its truest form is supposed to just happen. As much as you gather data and master technique and so on and so forth, the real truth is you should also be slightly surprised by what you bring out. Technically, describing my work is never going to be, I try sometimes, and other times you learn from artists going many years back. After some time they stop titling their work. Some of them don't title their work, some of them don't give you descriptions, because sometimes you've done something and it's someone else that shows you what that thing actually is. And you then realize, oh yes, that's it. You can look at a Jackson Pollock work and 100 people will have 100 different descriptions of the work, but it's the same piece. And the artist now becomes one. He's not the majority anymore. Anybody who stands in front and has an informed point of view, that's the person. That's what the person is thinking, that's what the person is saying. So how then can the artist have a bigger voice than 100 people or 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people? He was just expressing something he felt at the time. And then over time, it translates to mean so many different things. And this is where, once again, GT Bank's involvement is very vital. They made it a point of duty. If you went into any GT Bank branch, all the art was Nigerian art. All the art was from young, emerging artists, and they were given that opportunity of voice. Now other people, of course, have started doing things like that in their branches. So first of all, I will start by commending GT Bank because they say the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time is right now. And whatever the move is, I just pray that they sustain it straight through and they keep the drive the same way they have with the other projects.